Okay. I am for once just gonna jump straight into this because otherwise I'll do this opening sequence, this opening of this video about 500 times. But today we're going to be talking about the birth, and this video is as much for me as it is for you guys because I want to be able to remember the birth of our baby and not, as the years go by, kind of be like, oh, what was it that happened? If you know me, you know that I've made some notes. Let's get to it. So the whole process of this baby arriving kind of started about 6 days before he was actually born. That's when I felt the first proper contraction. I had had these practice contractions, Braxton Hicks, for, months, since I had been about 20 weeks, I think. So I was very used to having contractions. They were getting quite frequent towards the end. This was about 35 weeks that I was when he was born. But they were never painful. It was literally just, I could feel my stomach, my uterus tightening, and that was it. But 6 days before he was born, I, for the first time, one time in the evening, felt, it felt different, like a little bit painful. But very, very, very slight, if that makes sense. The next day it happened again, just the one time. Ironically, the next day we had this birth class, I suppose you could call it, this like seminar that everyone who is a first time expectant parent goes to. And we had that, and they like talked about the labor and what to do if you start having contractions, that you should take a gram of paracetamol and have a hot shower and just kind of see if it goes away, and then you know that you're not actually in labor. So that was the tip that came in very handy just a few days later. Then for like the next 3 days or whatever, 3-4 days, I was having quite regular contractions, but they would always go away in the night. So I wasn't like panicking by any means. At this stage, I still thought that maybe I could like stop this, stop this train. So I was resting a lot, literally just kind of laying on the sofa watching TV. Then the day before he was born in the night. So for me, like the day before was like the proper full day before. Then I again started having really regular contractions and quite a lot of them. And at that point I actually called the hospital, and they said, well, obviously because I was only 35 weeks, they said I might be in labor, or it might be that I have a urinary tract infection. So they suggested that the following morning I go to the lab, do a urine sample, take a urine test, whatever it's called, and we'll see if I have a UTI, because that might be why I'm having contractions, and then they might be able to like give me medicine and stop the contractions. As I went to bed, the contractions stopped, so I was like, hallelujah. Then the following morning, kind of D-Day, I woke up at 7:15 from a contraction, and the contractions kept coming at about 10 to 15 minutes apart. You would think that at this stage I would have been like freaking out, been like, oh my god, the baby's coming today, but somehow we were still so, I don't want to say in denial, because we had like obviously throughout the past few days talked about the fact that this baby might be coming now since my contractions had started. But we were insanely chill for some reason. I don't know why. And now, I've said this so many times to Dave, it gives me almost like anxiety to think about how calm we were. I'm getting a little bit like emotional now thinking about it. I don't know why. So then we just kind of got ourselves into the city, and I did the urine sample, and it was pouring down with rain. But we got home and we were like, okay, let's make the baby's bed. It might be time to make the baby's bed, like build the actual like little side sleeper crib that he's gonna be in. So we did that, but again, we were so chill that Dave even like went out and got some stuff for a video. He did a taste test video, and I was just again laying on the sofa, having some candy, trying to like relax. But the contractions were then about 7 minutes apart. Still very calm. Not sure how it's possible. Maybe around like 5 o'clock in the evening, I took a paracetamol and I thought, okay, let's see what happens. The contractions didn't slow down. As I was getting ready to go into the shower, I realized that I had started bleeding. So then I literally just went to Dave and I was like, we're going to hospital. There was no, thinking about it at that stage. So I called the hospital, told them the situation. They said, yeah, definitely come in. Like, if nothing else, then somebody will want to look at you, because again, I was only 35 weeks. So that was about 8 o'clock that we left for the hospital. They put me into a room with like, they strapped me in with all these like monitors and things. And they basically wanted to check that I wasn't, you know, lying, that I was actually having quite frequent, quite regular contractions. And about after an hour, we got to see a doctor and she like examined me and she said, okay, you're 2 centimeters dilated. And at that point, I was just like, well, thank bloody God. Like, I haven't been, you know, going through this for nothing. And I have to say, like, all throughout, like, that last day, the contractions weren't, like, super painful. Like, they had been totally bearable, totally fine. Like, a little bit like some kind of period cramping or period pain. But as we got to the hospital, really after I started bleeding, they were starting to get a little bit more intense. But again, still completely manageable. And I have to say, at that point, maybe I even remember thinking like, if this is it, then it's totally okay. But obviously it wasn't it. But yeah, so 2 centimeters dilated. And they were like, oh, you can go home, you know, and wait it out. It might be a while. And I was like, no thanks. I'm 35 weeks. I'm gonna stay here. If it's all the same to you. So they put us back into this room, private room, which was really nice. And that's kind of when the real work started, I'd say. The contractions started being a lot more like powerful, a lot more, not overwhelming, but like they kind of stopped me from like talking or doing anything else. And I think we had a really good thing going on with Dave, that for each contraction we kind of, either he was like massaging my lower back, or I was on this like blow up ball and we would just kind of, I don't know, put our heads together and just kind of like get through it together, breathe really calmly, really quietly. By the way, I had read this book. I don't have it anymore. I borrowed it from a friend. I don't know if it's available in any other language, but it's called Föda utan rädsla, and it basically saved the entire birth. I'm so grateful to have read that book before, because I was able to use so much of what she talks about, all these like tools for a successful, positive birth. I was really into like visualizing, like with each contraction, how the uterus was contracting and pushing the baby down, and that it was like a really good thing. I was really like in the zone, and yeah, just not panicking, just kind of just going with the flow. And yeah, to have Dave there was so helpful. Like how I would have done that alone, I don't know. Then around midnight they came and checked me again, and at that point I was 4 centimeters dilated. So I guess the midwife then was like, we are speeding ahead. So she was like, okay, I'm gonna get you into the delivery room now. And you would think that a person would maybe like freak out at that stage and be like, oh my God, we're having a baby. But I don't remember being like freaked out. I was just like, okay, we were just so like going with the flow. And I don't know, I think we both felt like really safe and calm. So neither one of us like freaked out. But that's when I got to get into this really sexy hospital wear, my little hospital outfit, and we walked over to the delivery room. Had to stop in between for contractions. At that point they were about 3 minutes apart, so it was getting pretty intense and quite painful, but I have to say it was still all like very positive. It wasn't too painful. I mean, it was painful, but it wasn't too painful. I could manage, let's say. Then we get into the delivery room and the contractions started becoming quite intense. I had talked to the midwife about having an epidural. She was like, okay, well, would you like to try the gas and air or the TENS, these like little like vibrating massagey things? And I was like, sure, I'll try them. The massagey things it was like too much work trying to like press the buttons to make them go off at the right time and at the right intensity. So I kind of sacked that off quite quickly. And then the gas and air, so that's like this gas that you breathe in and it makes you feel quite like lightheaded. It worked really well for like the first few contractions, but then, I don't know, it didn't work so well. And it kind of like distracted me from my like calm breathing, because you feel like you're bloody Darth Vader or something breathing into this mask, and it makes this like really like creepy sound. So wasn't a fan of that either. And maybe after like an hour or an hour and a half, maybe an hour, let's say, in the delivery room, I had one contraction and suddenly like everything changed. Like it got really like dark. The best way that I've been able to describe it to people is that it was like a thunderstorm inside me. Like everything that had been like really positive like turned really dark, really negative, and I was like one time hit with no, like this is too much. And then I just straight away asked for the epidural, and very quickly they prepped me for the epidural. The anesthesiologist came in, administered the epidural on one side, and as I turned over I was like I'm feeling a lot of pressure in the general like bum area. And I said this to the midwife and she was like, yeah, unfortunately the epidural can't take away that like feeling of like the pressure. And I was like, okay. And then at the next contraction I was feeling so uncomfortable. Like everyone says that giving birth feels like you're having like the biggest poo of your life, and it was definitely like that kind of pressure. And apparently, I don't remember this, but Dave says that apparently I said, I feel like I need to push. And I do remember the midwife kind of going, like something like switched in her. And she like got into like a different mode and she was like, do you feel like you need to push? And then she immediately came and like checked me. The epidural was at that point still like, I was still like turned over so that the epidural would like fall onto the other side, because you have to do like one side at a time or run to the other side, whatever. But yeah, she checked me and she was like, okay, you can start pushing. And I was like, okay, but am I 10 centimeters? Like it was really important for me not to like start pushing before it was actually time. So I was like, am I at 10 centimeters? And she was like, yeah. Which I didn't know like what that meant at that stage, but looking at my paperwork later on, apparently I was like over 10 centimeters. My little like diagram is like, so at that point I had dilated like 4 centimeters or over 4 centimeters in like 45 minutes. Because when I got the epidural, I was at 6. I think I forgot to mention that. So, but yeah, so then in like 45 minutes, I was fully dilated and started pushing. I feel like the epidural had like come into effect because I didn't feel any pain. I felt the need to push with each contraction, but it wasn't painful at all. And it was really like satisfying in the beginning to start pushing because there was just so much pressure and it felt like pushing like kind of gave that release. So yeah, then we were like fully going, and at that stage another midwife had come into the room as well, this like older lady, and they were so supportive, and I had Dave there of course also, and somehow they managed to communicate even though they didn't speak much English, but it was fine. And yeah, I started pushing, and now thinking back, it's just the most surreal thing, like pushing a human baby out of you. It's so weird. Anyway, at that point my water hadn't broken yet. So then she, after maybe 10 minutes or something, the midwife popped the membrane. So then my water went, and then she was like, yeah, I can feel the baby's head, it's right there. And I was like, okay. I think at one point they asked me if I wanted to feel it, but I was like, no. I was like in my own world. But then he was literally out. I think I pushed a total of like 35 minutes or something like that, which is a relatively short time to be pushing, I'd say. And it was totally doable. And suddenly they were like, oh, the head is out. And that's when Dave apparently had a peek and saw the baby's head just like there, which is so crazy. And then it was almost like a little bit of a break, maybe like I feel like it took a few minutes longer for the next contraction, and I was kind of like calming down. And I remember being like, so the rest of him still has to come out, and the midwife was like, that's the easy part, I'll help you with that. And then yeah, I guess it was like one push and he was out. And about 5 seconds later, my placenta came out as well. Flumps. And I straight away was like, is that normal? And they were like, no. But nobody panicked, of course. It was, I mean, apparently not unheard of, but not normal. Usually takes up to like an hour for the placenta to be born. I suppose they reckon that it was because everything happened so quickly, like I dilated so quickly, the baby was born so quickly, that the placenta just kind of just came with him, basically. And yeah, and then the baby was born and he was just there on the table, and even though they took him straight away, I remember they like picked him up and they were like, bye, and me and Dave were like literally like waving him off, which feels so absurd now. But yeah, they took him straight away up to the NICU, neonatal intensive care unit. And well, I guess first Dave went with them when they just like did his basic like measurements and stuff downstairs, just in the other room. And then they went up with him, and suddenly I was left there with the midwife, and I had given birth. It was the strangest thing to like look down and see that my belly had shrunk with about like half its size. And yeah, and then they started doing all kinds, like weighing the placenta. Oh god, the other midwife was, the second midwife, like the helper midwife, was obsessed with my placenta. She was like, look at this, isn't it amazing? And I was like, yeah, that's fine, thank you. I think Dave was actually there as well, so he got a good look at the placenta. So they weighed that, and then I started bleeding quite a lot. And they kept like pushing, kind of squeezing my uterus, pushing it, and like more and more blood just kept going out, and they couldn't really see where the blood was coming from. So that was a little bit worrying, and I kind of said to Dave, I was like, just like, kind of keep an eye on me, like if something happens, like just make sure that I'm okay. And then Dave like went up to see the baby and still kept bleeding from inside. They reckoned that because the placenta came out so quickly, the uterus was like, whoa, what happened there? So yeah, kept bleeding. They had a doctor come in to have a look at the bleeding. He couldn't really locate it either, like the source, so to say, but he then did this thing and put he basically like made a homemade tampon that he kind of, I don't know how, don't ask me. Then I just kind of had to lay there, so I didn't get to see the baby again until like maybe 6 hours after he was born or something like that, because then I had to lay still for several hours while the bleeding stopped. They were giving me all kinds of like things through my whatever it was. So that's why that all like this whole like seeing the baby thing took so long. And then finally, when I felt kind of stable enough, Dave wheeled me down to see the baby. And then the rest is history. Yeah. I'll probably do another video at some point about his like development and what it's been like here at home since he's been born, and hopefully start doing some vlogs again soon. But I'm not putting any pressure on myself. This is a very special and unique time in our lives, but it feels good making videos again. I've really missed it, and I want to keep going. But this was the birth story. This is how our little baby came into this world. I hope that you enjoyed it. I will certainly be looking back at this, not only when I edit it, but also later on in life. So I'm really glad I did this, and hopefully I didn't scare anyone who's, you know, pregnant. And I hope that everyone who were pregnant at the same time as me, I hope your births went well. I'd really love to hear from you in the comments if you guys don't mind sharing. I know that at least, I think 10 ladies were pregnant at the same time, and also due in October. So hopefully, well, let's see, it's November now, so you've probably more or less, most of you will have had your babies already. So it'd be really, really nice to hear how you guys have been doing. But yeah, that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will be back hopefully very soon. Bye!